Matthew and Dan here from MiniWarGaming.com, bringing you another Dark Potential playtest session. We are now doing 0.2.1.5, kind of working on some new rules, and so the rules that we play here will most likely end up in 0.2.2. There is a new unit, the Commando, for the corporation, which we'll be going over, and we're going to be playtesting a new Suppression Fire, completely scrapping the old one because I didn't like it and it wasn't working out, and doing a very new one, so we'll describe that in the rules as we go along. So, and we're also going to be doing a scenario, which I think will really make a difference in the actual game. So we'll get into that in a second. So first, let's just take a look at the board and the armies. We'll talk about the new special rules, everything else. Okay, first off, we have, I'm going to be playing the Lantos. Dan's going to be playing the Corporation.
Yep.
And you can see this is the size of my army, and that's the size of his army. So it's interesting because I went more low-cost soldiers, which for the Lantos are higher cost, and he went for more higher-cost elites, which cost about the same as my low-cost soldiers. So it's actually roughly ending up with similar-sized armies. Not quite the same. I think he still outnumbered me, but it's interesting. The elite army went for more hordes, and the horde army, not that there's actually a horde army, but went for more elite.
Yeah, more feeling.
Yeah, so that's good. So quickly on my side, we have the Commander with his Electron Master. Got the Assassin. We've got the Manipulator, who's also a commander, so he's like he's also a commander. And then we've got the Infector as well. And then I decided to go for 3 squads. I actually wanted to bring 2 squads of shock troops, but I could only find a few jump pack Marines. So I decided to just go for 2 squads of regular soldiers, 1 of 5, 1 of 6, and then a full squad of shock troops as well. So really maxing out my squads, except for obviously the one that's 5. And that is his Lantos army. So if we go look at the Corporation army, like I said, there's a new unit in there, or a new solo, and we'll get to that in a second. That's this guy right here. So what do you have right here?
Alright, so we got the Commander, all your command point goodness. We got a Sniper, and then we got 2 heavy weapon specialists. This one with a machine gun, and this one with the flame launcher. We got a Medic, and we got 3 squads of their
corporate agents.
Alright, and then a Recruiter, which has kind of like a mini commander.
So the Recruiter is the sergeant. We've just renamed a few things.
Okay. Sergeant.
So it's actually not the commander, that's a director.
Oh, director.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. Director. Yeah. And then we have just little crappy recruits, just minimum 3 squad. You're going to throw smoke grenades, and the Commando. So he's also stealth, and he's good in close combat and counter ranged. Yeah,
the Commando's a new unit. Let's show it to you on the paper. So basically he's a little faster. He's movement 7. He's got a nice high defensive 6 but a low armor. His strength is 4, which means in close combat with his combat knife he's strength 6, which is good. He's got 3 attacks. His shooting's only 13, so it's not particularly high, but his close combat is 13, which is pretty good. His perception's better, his leadership is good. He's got 3 wounds, 1 command point, and he only costs 4 points. Then he's stealth 2, so he has 2 tokens that have to stay within 6 inches of each other. He's dug in, so he gets +1 cover bonus. Pathfinder, we're looking for a new rule. It's probably going to be called Agile, which is he just basically ignores difficult terrain. And Pistol Expert, basically as a free action, he gets to fire his pistol, no matter what. He could be in close combat, he could be running, he could toss a smoke grenade, but he always gets an extra action of firing his pistol, which might sound really powerful, but remember a pistol is just a strength 5, range 6, rate of fire 1 weapon. So it's just to give him that little extra edge, so he can charge into combat, do his attacks, and then fire his pistol in there as well. So he's a gun-toting commando with a crappy pistol. So that is the Corporation army. And then here's our board, jam-packed with terrain, really trying to block line of sight. We've declared that if you pass over from the same level to the same level, these pieces of terrain, it blocks line of sight, except at the edges, it'll be true line of sight, and through these little paths as well, that's true line of sight. But if you're up a level, then it's just true line of sight when you're looking at those. So, 2 big new things that we're going to be doing. First, let's talk about the new Suppression Fire, or Suppressive Fire.
Yes.
So you don't know anything about this yet?
No.
So basically the way it's going to work...
Want me to film you?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Suppressive Fire, the way it's going to work is, let's say we have squads set up like this. There's line of sight. to do Suppressive Fire, it takes a command point, just like before, but that's where the similarities end. You choose a target, either squad or a solo, within 3 times the range of the weapon. The only people who can perform Suppressive Fire... Holy cow. Stupid phone. Alright. The only people who can perform Suppressive Fire are squads that have at least 4 members still alive and who have a rate of fire of at least 2 on their weapons. Okay, so if the squad drops below 4, they can no longer do Suppressive Fire, and you'll see why. It's actually pretty powerful. Or solos with weapons that have the Suppression Fire or Suppressive Fire special rule. In this case, the only person with that rule on the board is the machine gun. So Dan's machine gun guy has a Suppressive Fire special rule. Everybody else, the solos, are not going to be able to do this. So it's mostly a squad thing with the occasional heavy weapon that can do it. So what you do is, as an action, you nominate a target that's in line of sight. So this only works in line of sight, so it's no longer an area denial terrain or area denial tactic. And what you're going to do is they have to be within 3 times the range of the weapon. So these guys' range weapons are 8, so they have to be within 24 inches, which they are. And it works just like firing. If the one guy's not within 24 inches, then he just does not participate. And then what you do is you fire at the squad as normal, except you ignore their defense. So you're rolling to hit, ignoring their defense, no matter what it is. You still do cover, you still do range, you still do grav mines or smoke grenade, whatever else might be affecting your shooting. All that applies. It's only the defense of the target that does not matter. And the reason for that is because you're not trying to hit them, you're trying to suppress them. But cover does matter, because if they're in super heavy cover, they're much less likely to be suppressed because they feel more confident. And you can argue about that all you want. That's just, the mechanics need to work in a certain way, and this way it works. So you fire, and then if I hit, then the target squad has to take a leadership roll with a negative modifier equal to the margin of success of the hit. So even if this margin of success is 0, it still hits, but there just won't be a modifier to the leadership. And so what you need is a nice healthy 4, 5, or 6 margin of success, which can be tough to get unless they happen to be out in the open and everything. If that succeeds, or sorry, if they fail the leadership test, they are suppressed. When you are suppressed, you cannot activate in your next turn. Now we're going to have to work out some details, like if you're sitting in an AoE that's fired, do you still, like maybe you activate and immediately your activation ends and all that kind of stuff. We'll work out those details later on. But right now, it basically takes that squad out of the game for 1 turn. If that sounds super powerful, well, it's meant to be. Because this game is very killy, you have to have something good enough to not want to shoot at the squad. And that's the big thing. So you do your math and you're like, well, if I shoot at the squad, now mind you, they're out in the open here, so I think I'd rather shoot at them. But if they were in cover, heck, if they were in heavy cover, a nice level 3 cover, and plus you're at 3 range bands away, so it's going to be -2, you're looking at a -5 modifier, and then their defense, which is usually 3 or 4. So you're lucky to get a hit off, and then you might, with a use of a lot of command points, be able to kill one of them, in which case they have to take a leadership roll or run. But fleeing is different than being suppressed, because with fleeing they can still fire and they can still rally and all that. When they're suppressed, there's no way for them to not be suppressed. And if they're near a commander, then most likely they won't get suppressed, but it's going to chew through a lot of command points in order for that to happen. Because you take a regular squad with leadership of 6 or 7, you hit them with a margin of success of 3 or 4, they're taking a leadership test on, even if the commander's nearby, of 5 or 6. So they might get lucky and roll it, in which case, well, that's just one of the chances you take in the game. Or they could fail it and they have to chew through a few command points. And if they do, you know what happens. If you've been watching the games, you know what happens when your opponent runs out of command points. It's a bad place to be in. So that's the new Suppressive Fire. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. All right, so now one thing to clarify, the corporate agents have a corporation rifle. And the corporation rifle is only rate of fire 1, but it has the semi-automatic special rule. The semi-automatic special rule allows you to forfeit range for more rate of fire. So for every 1 range you forfeit, you get 1 extra rate of fire up to a maximum of 3 rate of fire. So that means if you want to do suppressive fire, you have to drop your range by 1 to get the rate of fire of 2. So their maximum suppressive range will be 21 inches, 7 times 3.
Well, that's cool. I never thought about that.
Yeah. So they are able to do suppressive fire, and I'll have to write this all up in the rules to go over situations like that, and semi-automatic and everything. So that's suppressive fire. Any questions?
No, I'm excited to suppress you.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
I don't know. I have smaller squads.
You can suppress solos or anything. And anybody who is suppressed loses the commander special rule while they are suppressed. So you suppress a commander, which obviously will be hard because he's got the most command points, and he'll just use them to stop you from suppressing him. But in that case, you burn through a lot of his command points. So you suppress a commander, and everybody around him is kind of screwed. So it can be a very effective tool. But it does require you to give up shooting, because you don't get to hurt them. And there's no way to hurt them with Suppressive Fire.
But you could get position, eh? Because, like, you could suppress somebody and then run out in the open, and then you have a turn, or run out in the open, suppress them, hopefully suppress them.
Yeah. That's
kind of risky. But then you could just get a great angle on them.
Yeah, and I have to make Suppression Fire very effective. Otherwise, it'll be like, I'll never use it. I'll just simply fire at the squad and kill one or two. And we know what happens. You just kill one or two out of a squad. That's very effective. So you have to make something that's equally as effective, if not more, in certain situations. The interesting thing will be if a squad's out in the open, they'll be super easy to suppress. But then they're also super easy to kill. Which one would you rather do? So, and then it kind of gets wonky, because if they're out in the open and they're suppressed, then in real life what they would do is run towards the nearest cover. So we might have to make rules like that, where they run to the nearest cover. But that's where it gets a little tricky.
Did you ever change it? I don't want to confuse the viewers, but can you move and shoot, or shoot and move, or do you always have to...
Always movement and then action.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'm going to leave it at that, because we might get some special characters in there that can do the opposite, can choose to do their action first. Like you might get a squad that's good at advancing kind of things, so they get to fire and then advance. But you might think, why would you want to do that? Well, you can fire and then retreat, is usually what it would be used for. But that might come in later on. Okay, so that's Suppressive Fire. So the second thing is we're going to be doing a scenario.
Ooh.
And I'm really excited about this. Now, on the forums, we had somebody submit a bunch of scenarios. And I have no idea how to say his username. But he has submitted, he has actually contributed a ton to Dark Potential. So thank you very much, cymruvoodoo. That's his username. How would you say that? That's a C-Y-M-R-U voodoo. The voodoo's obvious.
cymruvoodoo.
What's cymruvoodoo?
I don't know.
Does that mean something?
Not to me.
C-Y Mr. Voodoo. Or cymruvoodoo. Have you ever seen that? There's an old game show. It was called License Plates or something like that. And the whole game show, do you remember this?
Bumper Stompers.
Bumper Stompers. That's what it was. Yeah. And the whole game was based around, they had two teams, and they'd be shown a license plate that it was kind of like this, and they had a certain amount of time to figure out what it said. And that's what this reminds me of. So Mr. Voodoo. So I'm just going to call him Voodoo. So Voodoo submitted a ton of scenarios, and I love them. We had a really good discussion on the forums, or a bunch of people had a discussion on the forums, and then I contributed at the end, where somebody basically came on saying, we started off with this cool survivalist, post-apocalyptic feel with this hard science, but the game doesn't seem to be bringing that out. And the game is more just focusing on the cool effects and all the fighting and everything. And I have to say, I agree. A tabletop war game is not necessarily the best place to really show a post-apocalyptic game. I think a role-playing game would be more suited. It's kind of, and the example I gave on the forums is like StarCraft. StarCraft has a really cool story, a really cool history and universe. Yet when you're playing on this map that you can't leave, and everything is perfectly distanced from each other, and everybody, the Zerg, Protoss, and Terran, all happen to mine the same materials, and happen to be perfectly balanced to fight against each other. That's not realistic, right? And yet it's an awesome game. So you have to kind of find that balance here. Having said that, I think where we're going to get the feel of the survival aspect in the post-apocalyptic nature is in the scenarios. And this scenario, I think, is a great example. And so Voodoo submitted a bunch of scenarios. They might need some tweaking and all that, and we'll do that throughout the game. We're not really worried about balance in these scenarios right now. We're more just kind of wanting to throw in something that'll show the playstyle a little different. So this scenario is scenario number 2. Scenario number 1 is just the one we've always been playing, which is just simply walk on and try to beat the crap out of each other, and last man standing wins. Scenario 2 is called Foraging Party. So I'll read it. In this scenario, both sides are running low on basic supplies and need to make a push into dangerous territory in order to see what they can find. While these forces would not normally be out hunting for the basics, the need for supplies is critical, and the other members of each group are occupied looking in less dangerous areas. The militia know roughly what they're looking for, but have been instructed to bring everything they can find anyway, because somebody will likely have a use for it. Okay, so in deployment, we roll, and deployment zones are 8 inches instead of 12, is what he has here. So we'll just do that. I'm not, obviously, that's just ambiguous. The game length is random, and what you basically do is starting at the end of the 4th round is what he said. So we'll see if 4th is too soon. We'll see how much has happened by then. But starting at the end of the 4th round, each player rolls a leadership check using their highest leadership remaining on the board, modified by the number of forage tokens his or her side has accumulated. Okay, so the more stuff they've accumulated, the more likely they are to take off. It's kind of cool, eh?
Huh.
And yet the forage tokens are what you need to win. So this is interesting. So at the end of each round, both players do it. And if you have multiple units with the same high leadership, then you nominate one. The leadership test can be re-rolled as normal with command points, all that kind of stuff. So it's actually somebody rolling the command point to basically say, we're out of here. So he's just basically like, okay, we got enough, let's go. If either player fails this test, then the next turn is the last turn. Okay, we're good?
Mm-hmm.
So it's minimum 4 turns, and then after that, it's just as long as it is.
Can you modify that roll with command points?
Yes, I said that.
Oh.
Somebody's not listening.
No, not at all.
So, scenario special rules. Foragers. Every unit may choose to use their action to forage for anything they can find. This action can only be taken if the model or entire squad is within 3 inches of a piece of terrain, which is everywhere, or entirely within area terrain. So we're going to modify that a bit because obviously everywhere is within 3 inches. So we're going to say in base contact with or within terrain. So you have to be touching or inside of these pieces of terrain. Make sense?
Makes sense.
And that includes the entire squad. I'm also going to modify how it works for a squad, but we'll get that to in a second. The unit must make a perception test. See, one of the things that he was discussing is how he wanted perception to be used for more than just looking for stealth units. So that's kind of a neat idea. On a success, they find something that might be useful and gain a forage token. So that unit gains the forage token. Units which are killed leave their forage tokens behind. So they just, I think they're just lost. So we won't have them picked up. Units which flee carry their tokens with them. So if a unit flees off the board, you actually still get those forage tokens because they're just running back to base camp. So that's the first one. So far so good?
So far so good.
You have to use an action. Now I'm going to add something on there. A squad which uses their action will get a perception test modifier equal to how many guys are participating in that action. Okay?
So is it half the squad can shoot, half can forage, or if you're at a range, you have a less chance kind of thing?
I don't know, because it might be overpowered if one guy could forage while the other 3 fire, or the other 5 fire in some cases. It might make it too easy to forage. Because obviously it's not meant to get a lot of forage tokens. You're looking at maybe at most 5 or 6 or 7 forage tokens, because then nobody's going to make their leadership test once you get to that height, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that means if every squad, and you have like 4 squads, and I've got 3 squads, if they can have one guy always looking and the other guy's firing, it seems like they would get him. Okay, you know what? Scrap that. Let's just keep his rules and see how it works out.
Okie dokie.
You have to use the entire squad's action, and they just take 1 perception check with no modifiers. Okay, are we good?
Good.
So limited resources. Every man out there knows how important the things they find will be. They have been on short rations for some time now, and they know supplies are tight. I like how he writes all the fluff into it, because it makes it feel different. The more they find a value, the more likely they are to leave as soon as things look bad. For every forage token a unit possesses, it takes a -1 penalty to its leadership. And I'm going to specify, if it's using the commander nearby, it still takes a -1 to his leadership. So whatever leadership they would be using, they get a -1 for every forage token that they have. Okay? Pretty cool, eh?
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So it'll be easy to suppress a squad that has lots of forage tokens. Not that anybody will have a lot of forage tokens. So win conditions. The side which possesses the most forage tokens at the end of the final round wins. Units which have fled off the table with forage tokens count each token once. Units still on the tabletop with forage tokens count those tokens twice, and determining the final total for each side. So you don't want guys to flee off the board.
Now you can, is there anything more?
That's it. So what questions do you have? Because we might need to clarify certain things.
Okay, so you're in the terrain and you get a forage token, can you just forage in that same terrain? You have to skip?
Yeah. But you keep sacrificing your action every time you do it.
Okay.
We'll see how it works, because maybe we'll get too many. Because you're taking perception checks. And for squads, well, I guess all my perceptions are like 8. 7, 8, 9, and 10. What are your perceptions like?
7,
8, 9, and 10.
and then 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, so the 7s are like 50-50. The 8s are like 60% chance. 9s are like 70-something% chance. What are you thinking? We're going to get too many forage tokens too quickly?
I don't know.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. So for forage tokens, we'll use... Not that we don't have enough of these beads. We'll use these blue beads.
I don't know. I think maybe it'd be a good idea to have it so you only get 1 forage token per piece of terrain per game. So it forces you.
So once that piece of terrain has been foraged.
Right. So it you know, so you could grab them early, but then you're weak for the rest of the game, whether you have them or weaker. But then you also have to advance and get the other ones.
That's a good idea. I like that idea. Because there's tons of terrain, and there
Yeah.
always will be a ton of terrain in this game. So how about this? If you forage and find one, then you roll it. Basically, if you forage, you roll a die. And if you found one, then on a 2+, it's depleted. If you didn't find one, then on a 5+, it's depleted.
Oh.
How's that sound?
You find it empty.
Yeah. I just made up those numbers right now, but... So it's most likely to be depleted if you found something. And it's... Alright, let's say 3+ if you find one, if found, and 5+ if not found. How's that sound?
Sounds good. Sure.
Okay. So there's a chance that the same piece of terrain will yield multiple forage tokens. Does that make sense, right?
Yep.
You might find this awesome cache. So.
Sit there and run, run.
Yeah,
not off the board though, because you get halved or counts normal compared to double.
Okay, so are we good?
I'm excited to play.
That sounds fun, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a good change. We did a full week or a couple weeks of just doing playtests of normal rules with no special scenarios. I think it's time that we do some special scenarios. So thank you again, cymruvoodoo, and let's see how this plays. So let's roll to see who goes first.